In a previous video, I was showing how I took some rough sawn pine boards that I just got from a local sawmill and I changed them into some weathered, antique, repurposed looking boards that I used on the ceiling on the porch. And in the comments of that video, someone asked if you could do that with a new board. And I think what they meant, if you could take a plain kiln-dried board that you just bought from a retail lumber store and change that into a weathered looking board. And you actually can. And in this video, I'll show the steps it takes that I can change this pine kiln-dried board that's surfaced, that's planed on 4 sides, and change it into a weathered looking barn board. Now this is a new board. It's a standard grade pine board. It's kiln dried and surfaced on 4 sides. It's been planed on all 4 sides and it's nice and smooth. And the first thing I want to do is I want to roughen this up. And I'm going to do what they call raising the grain. And what you do to raise the grain is you moisten the surface and then sand it with a real rough sandpaper. So that's what I'm going to do right now. This is just some water. Take a rag. I'm going to spread water all over this board. And I want the water to soak in. Now I'll probably do this maybe 1 or 2 more times over the next 20 minutes. I want to give it at least 20 minutes to soak the water in. And what that does, it'll soften parts of the board up. So when you go to sand it, it'll take away that softened wood and leave a rough grain on it. Well, I think I left this soak up water for long enough. And now I'm going to take this disc sander. This is a real coarse sandpaper. I don't remember, I think it's almost like a 16 grit. And I'm going to use this to roughen this surface up. And I'll give a close-up of what it looks like after I raise the grain with that rough sandpaper. And I think that's probably the most important step in making this look like a rough weathered barn board, is getting the grain raised. Now I'm going to let this dry out in the sun here, and then I'll stain it with that vinegar and steel wool concoction. Now I'm going to come back and get this sawdust off here. I'm going to come back and I'm going to go over this now with this vinegar steel wool concoction stain. I showed how to make this in that previous video. And I'm just going to soak it down with this stuff now. Get it all soaked down. Empty bucket, steel wool, and vinegar. And let that sit for about a day. And then I'm going to set this out for it to activate. Actually, I'll probably maybe stick it in the greenhouse overnight, because it can take over a day sometimes. It's getting kind of cool here at night. I want to keep it warm and bright as possible. Like I was saying in another video, I think the sunlight does something to activate this more. So I'm going to stick it in the greenhouse for a while, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to sand it again. It's the next day, and this is the result of the vinegar stain. This is the other side. It did stain it some on here where I got over on the edge. And now I'm gonna take a sander and sand this down a little bit. I have it sanded now to about where I want it. I sand the edge down just a little bit more than the rest of the board, almost down to bare wood, because it kind of highlights it a little bit after you're done, and it makes it look a little bit more interesting. Now for the finish I'm going to put on this, I'm putting the water base polyacrylic on here. The oil base makes it a little bit more golden, yellowy, kind of a warmer tone, but this is kind of more of a clear, and that's what I'm going for. And we'll see what happens when they start. This darkens it up some too when you put this on. Now this is just a standard grade pine board, and I'll flip it over so you can see what the other side. That's what the side looks like if you just get it from the retail lumber store, and this is what it turned out to be. I gotta get a little bit more polyacrylic on the end there, but this is the result. It almost looks like it turns it a little bit brown too, instead of just gray. This'll, when this dries up, I'll sand it and put another coat on. And I'll put a second coat polyacrylic on there. I'm using these boards for the ceiling in the addition. I don't want to be too dark, that's why I sanded quite a bit off. These pine boards will naturally darken some more over time. They always seem to do. But I think you could probably use any kind of stain you wanted to. Once you raise the grain, like I did, I think almost any stain would work too, if you want a different color. I'm not going to put any distress marks on here, but I am going to do that on some beam decor I'm going to have inside too. And I'm going to do that a little bit different than this. So I need to match some of the other post and beam stuff I have in the house already. And each board that you do with this turns out a little bit different. Some are darker, some are lighter. This one's got a lot of character right through here. And a couple knots, and I think that looks pretty nice. Just a standard pine board. Standard quality pine board. And making some distress marks on this board. This has got one coat of polyurethane on it. So this won't soak all the way around it, just where I did some chopping. This is just a real dark wood stain. Get down with it. This is like decor beam, it's called. It's real, almost black. Just get it in those spots where I chopped the bare wood, and it soaks up that stain, and then wipe that out of there. This will be sanded again too. So I'm getting some distress marks on this. I am going to stain this a little bit darker, but I want to get these distress lines in there right now first. And a few more to go. I need to match some woodwork and beams that are already in the house. So I'm staining this a little bit after I distressed it with a hatchet, dark stain. This is real, I'm putting a light coat of stain over it. It's actually probably more mineral spirits than stain. It was originally called gun stock. But when you have this one coat of polyurethane on there and a diluted stain, it doesn't darken it that much. Then after this I'll sand it a little bit and put another coat of polyurethane over it. I'm pretty sure this is about the color I'm looking for. Where the house opens up into the addition, that's where beam decor is going to go. Trying to make it look like a solid beam there. Want to match what I have on the other part of the house. That's a fir 6x10. I think it's about 16 feet long, maybe a little bit shorter. But that's load bearing there, so that's all solid wood. But over here, this isn't a load bearing wall. There's a engineered roof truss right above it. But I'm going to try to make it look like a solid beam. So that's just a fir 2x10 I got there. I got it notched into the wall, so it's going to look like it's kind of set right in the wall. And now I'm just preparing the bottom piece. And that'll fit right up against this 45. Trying to make that corner pretty tight so it looks like a solid beam, but this is how I'm doing a fake beam. And then I'm also notching a little bit on the end for the uprights. May try to make it look like a post, but it's just going to be boards. That's kind of what I got on the other side, so that's what I'm working on right now. I'm going to probably stuff a little more insulation back up in these spaces and go ahead and put that bottom part on. I guess it don't look too bad. Pretty sharp corner. Little glue squeezed out, but it looks like that's gonna work all right. It look like a big beam. And this is how the finished ceiling ended up looking. I just put the boards right up over that craft faced insulation paper. It was a brown paper. So these boards will probably shrink up a little bit, but there won't be anything real noticeable if they do, because the paper was brown too. And I just butted the boards right up against that beam decor. There's a 2x10 that was ripped down. And when I finished, I had some boards left over and I ripped them down and put a trim piece all around the ceiling. And I built myself a little frame for scuttle hole. And now I got some windows to trim out. But these look like weathered barn boards. I think they'll darken up a little bit, but I think they look pretty good. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.